Have you ever had the feeling that life can change in an instant? Today, I'm going to tell you an incredible story of overcoming and spiritual transformation based on a near-death experience that changed everything forever. Before we start, comment here which city you're watching from and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more impactful stories like this. Now, get ready, because this journey will make you rethink the true meaning of life. My name is Zayden Everhart, and I've always believed that life was a precise equation of effort and results. I grew up in Los Angeles, a city where the lights never go out, where every corner pulses with the energy of progress, and where a person's worth was measured by what they achieved professionally. For years, I was the epitome of the modern executive, determined, ambitious, with an eye on the future and a cold heart to distractions that didn't contribute to my success. I remember one day, sitting at my desk on the top floor of the company where I worked, watching the skyline that stretched out amidst the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles. Zayden, this quarter's numbers are above expectations, but we need to think of ways to reduce costs, said the boss, always with a tone that mixed demand and coldness. I nodded, but inside, something began to worry. I had never stopped to think that maybe there was more to life than charts and goals. Between meetings, phone calls, and quick decisions, my routine was marked by the silence of a chosen solitude, where personal relationships were merely accessories, replaced by the constant sound of notifications and chords of signed contracts. Family, spirituality, and even the small pleasures of life were neglected, as if everything that mattered was contained within the cold logic of the corporate world. I used to tell myself, faith doesn't fill budget gaps, it doesn't close contracts, it doesn't accelerate success. This conviction, forged in a childhood where religion was presented in a rigid and punitive way, solidified my skepticism. Faith, for me, was a belief that did not align with the rationality that the market demanded. However, behind this veil of rationality, there was a silent anguish that I preferred to ignore. One morning, as I was quickly preparing breakfast and checking emails on my cell phone, I heard the soft voice of my mother, who rarely had the opportunity to see me closely. Zayden, remember when we were happy together? Not in such a rush, she insisted, with a look full of longing and concern, but I could barely articulate a response, immersed in my own thoughts and commitments. At that exact moment, a part of me began to question whether everything I was pursuing really made sense. I didn't speak out loud, but thoughts accumulated like echoes in an empty chamber. Am I living the life I always wanted? Or just the life imposed on me by the expectations of a world that values material success above all else? Thus, the image of a successful executive overlapped with that of a man divided between two worlds, the merciless world of business and the silent universe of a forgotten spirituality. Even though I would never admit it publicly, there was a latent desire to seek something more, something that would fill the voids left by a cold and dehumanizing routine. This is my story, told with the simplicity of someone who never thought about writing books or giving lectures, but who felt, in an unexpected moment, that the path to true happiness was far from reports and spreadsheets. Today, I share these thoughts with the intention of recording, even if discreetly, the journey that completely transformed my existence. My routine before the accident was a frantic dance of commitments and deadlines, a whirlwind that made me forget to even breathe. Mornings started early, with the alarm going off mercilessly at 5:30 a.m. I got up with the same haste as always, while the city of Los Angeles was still slowly stretching out in the pale light of dawn. On the way to the office, the city was already waking up, but I barely had time to take in the scenery. Hurried faces, cars that were confused among the intense traffic, and a feeling that every minute was too precious to be wasted. Back then, breakfasts were consumed on the go, with a cup of strong espresso in hand, while I mentally reviewed the day's meetings. I remember a specific morning when, in a brief interval, my cell phone rang with a text message from my mother. Zayden, don't forget to take care of yourself today. I love you. My response was automatic, almost emotionless. You can leave it, Mom. I'm fine. These interactions, although full of affection, were always overwhelmed by the fast pace that I imposed on my life. Family connections were relegated to brief moments between one commitment and another, always overshadowed by the demands of work. The office was my second home, an environment dominated by numbers, strategies, and goals. Conversations between colleagues rarely went beyond the professional sphere. In one of these meetings, a colleague casually commented, "Zayden, have you considered taking a few days off? Maybe some time to breathe out of this crazy rhythm?" I laughed and replied, a little disconcerted, "Time off is for the weak. We have goals to meet." These words echoed not only in the corporate environment, but within me. Although I insisted that success depended on absolute dedication, there were quiet moments when physical and emotional exhaustion caught up with me, reminding me that perhaps I was sacrificing too much. My upbringing, marked by a rigid and punitive religious doctrine, also left its mark. As a child, I was taught to fear error, to see failure as something that stained my soul. This spiritual heritage has turned into skepticism over the years, making me resistant to any kind of faith or spiritual comfort. Faith doesn't pay the bills, I used to say, convinced that the world was governed only by reason and pragmatism. Despite this conviction, a persistent emptiness settled inside me. On particularly lonely days, upon returning home, I would find myself sitting in front of the mirror, silently questioning, is all this running around really getting me anywhere, or am I just running aimlessly? These moments of introspection were brief and were soon replaced by the anxiety of facing the next day. Amid the incessant routine, I tried to find small refuges, a book read in secret, a night walk to clear my mind, or even a quick conversation with a colleague who, like me, felt the weight of expectations. However, every attempt to reconnect with something deeper was quickly swallowed up by the merciless pace of corporate life. Thus, the days followed one another, marked by a constant sense of urgency and the unconscious desire to fill a space that material success could never achieve. That was the life I led, an existence that valued productivity above all else, leaving little room for the soul and the discovery of greater meaning. It was an afternoon that started like any other. I was leaving the company's imposing building, with the California sun still shy, when fate decided to intervene abruptly. As I hurriedly walked down the sidewalk of a busy street in Los Angeles, the sound of my footsteps and the steady beat of my thoughts were interrupted by a screeching sound, a sharp crack that reverberated through the air. I looked up, confused, and saw something I never imagined. A wooden board, dropped from a neighboring building, falling towards me. No, I thought as my instincts alerted me to the imminent danger. But before I could react, the board slammed into my head with brutal force. The impact was so violent that time seemed to slow down for a few moments. I felt a searing pain invade my body, as if every fiber of me was being shattered into 1,000 pieces. The city, which until then vibrated with everyday energy, was transformed into a whirlwind of colors and distorted sounds. As I fell, the last thing I heard was the muffled scream of a passerby, followed by the distant echo of sirens. My mind struggled to stay awake, but the pain and impact became increasingly oppressive. Darkness began to fill my field of vision, and the feeling of floating out of control replaced the firmness of the ground beneath my feet. It was at that moment that I realized something extraordinary was about to happen, or perhaps reality was transforming before me. In the midst of that vortex of sensations, an inexplicable calm began to settle in. Instead of the fear I expected to feel, there was a strange sense of serenity, as if, even on the verge of death, a greater force was guiding me. In the midst of the pain, I heard a soft, almost imperceptible voice, whispering, "You are not alone." There was no face or shape, just a presence that, even without identifying it, seemed to care for me. As my consciousness fluctuated between life and a state I had never imagined, the physical world receded. My body, previously rigid and full of life, seemed to dissolve, becoming part of a sea of sensations and colors. The sensation was one of lightness, as if every grain of pain was transformed into pure energy that blended with the environment around me. For a brief moment, I was able to contemplate the vastness of Los Angeles, the city I knew so well, now seen from a completely different point of view, a landscape where the boundaries between the concrete and the ethereal blur. As I floated, memories of my life flashed by like fragments of a slow-motion movie. Every decision, every encounter, and even lonely nights were mixed with this new feeling. In the midst of the transition, The presence that accompanied me seemed to say that death, or what I thought was death, was just a portal to something greater, an inevitable transformation. When the pain finally subsided and a sense of peace prevailed, a silent doubt crept in. Am I truly at the end, or just on the cusp of a new journey? This question resonated in the void, as I remained suspended between two worlds, not knowing if I would be able to return to the reality I knew. On the threshold between consciousness and oblivion, darkness gave way to surprising clarity. As the impact dissipated, I was enveloped by an intense blue light that seemed to caress every inch of my being. This glow was not blinding, but soft, almost maternal, capable of dissolving the pain and stiffness in my body. I felt as if every fiber, every thought, harmonized with that welcoming energy. "There is no more pain, only peace," whispered a soft, ethereal voice, resonating within me. I didn't see a face, but I felt the presence of something that transcended any physical form. It was as if I were being led by invisible hands, gently pushing me forward, away from the known world. At that moment, the perception of time and space began to fragment. There were no longer any barriers between past, present, and future. All the memories and feelings merged into a tapestry of emotions and colors. I found myself floating above Los Angeles, the city unfolding below like a distorted landscape, where the lights of cars and buildings blended with abstract geometric shapes. The view was so surreal that, for a moment, I lost the notion that I had once walked there. "It's like I'm suspended in a sea of possibilities," I thought, marveling at the feeling of weightlessness. My body seemed to have become intangible, a cloud that could cross the boundaries of reality and imagination. The physical pain had been replaced by a curious sense of expansion, as if my soul were opening to take in all the secrets of the universe. As I floated, I found myself in the midst of a landscape that defied logic. Luminous shapes appeared and disappeared, like musical notes in a cosmic symphony. At one of these moments, the voice echoed again, now with a firmer and more encouraging tone. "Are you ready to see what lies beyond the veils of this world?" The question hung in the air, and although I couldn't answer in words, a silent understanding washed over me. There was an imminent transition, a passage into a state where existence became something much greater than I had ever imagined. This passage, marked by sensations of floating and lightness, was not a simple loss of consciousness, but the beginning of a journey beyond human limits. As I crossed this invisible border, the city below turned into a blur of colors and shadows, as if I were leaving behind an old chapter of a story. I now found myself in a space that defied description. There were no defined shapes, just a constant flow of lights and shadows that danced in perfect harmony. The feeling of freedom was overwhelming, but at the same time, there was a gentle uneasiness, the awareness that I was about to enter unknown territory. The transition process was like walking across a suspension bridge between two worlds. With each moment, I felt myself getting closer to something essential and transformative, something that would prepare me for the new dimension that awaited beyond the veil. No matter how much the past and the pain dissipated, one question remained: what awaits me on the other side? As I moved away from the sensation of fluctuation that marked the transition, a new reality began to emerge before my eyes, revealing a scenario that seemed to have come from the deepest corners of a dream. Suddenly, the darkness gave way to a celestial landscape where planets and stars twinkled in a harmonious ballet, while indescribable colors blended into clouds of light, forming a visual symphony that defied all earthly logic. As I advanced, a staircase made of pure light energy emerged, stretching beyond the horizon. Each step seemed to pulse with a gentle vibration, as if inviting my soul to soar. As I approached, I felt that the staircase was, in fact, a passage, a portal that led to a dimension where existence took on forms I could never imagine. With each step, the feeling of purification grew, and the weight of my old life seemed to dissolve, as if the remnants of pain and fear were slowly washed away by a current of beneficial energy. "Zayden, are you ready for what's coming?" A soft voice echoed through the space, not coming from a specific place, but reverberating through my being. For a moment, I doubted whether it was a figment of my imagination or the embodiment of this new reality. But the answer I felt left no room for doubt. Yes, I was prepared to transcend the limits of what I knew. As he advanced up the staircase, the feeling of being guided by a benevolent presence intensified. I could almost see the outline of a translucent bridge in front of me, flanked by fields of bright flowers. These flowers, with vibrant and luminous colors, exuded a subtle perfume that mixed the sweetness of hope with the serenity of a new beginning. It was as if each petal contained the essence of a rebirth, inviting me to leave the weight of the past behind. Upon reaching the base of the bridge, I stopped to admire the vastness of the scenery that opened up in front of me. On the other side, the landscape transformed into an ocean of light, where each wave seemed to carry a silent message of love and redemption. I could see, at a glance, fragments of past memories and emotions transforming into pure energy, merging with that transcendent environment. "Fear not," whispered the voice again, this time with a tone that conveyed safety and welcome. "This is your chance to free yourself from the shackles of what prevented you from seeing the true essence of life." As these words echoed in my mind, a feeling of absolute peace and acceptance took hold. I knew that by crossing that bridge, I was not abandoning my identity, but rather allowing a new version of myself to emerge, fuller, more connected to the universe. With a mixture of reverence and curiosity, I took the first step onto the translucent bridge. The surface beneath my feet seemed to gently undulate, as if celebrating my presence, and each movement was accompanied by a feeling of liberation and inner clarity. The crossing was long and, at the same time, incredibly brief, as if time no longer had any relevance in that realm of pure energy and light. I felt like the journey was just beginning, and that, at the end of that journey, I would find answers to questions I didn't even know I needed to ask. Each step resonated as an invitation to leave the old me behind and embrace the new dimension that was unfolding before my eyes. As I walked across the translucent bridge, each step took me to a clearing where the environment subtly changed. The colors seemed to intensify, and among the gentle dance of light and shadow, familiar shapes began to materialize. Little by little, I felt the warm presence of those who long ago left this world. My heart raced and, at the same time, calmed with the comforting feeling of a hug that transcends time. The first figure to approach was that of my father, whose image I always kept with affection and who had passed away many years ago. He was standing with his arms open, radiating a serenity that I had never experienced in life. His eyes, as deep as the ocean, conveyed unconditional love. "So, son, it's good to see you," he said in a soft voice, which seemed to echo both in space and in my soul. Surprised, I felt tears welling up. "It was not a physical reunion, but a communion of spirits," I replied. "Dad, I missed you more than I can express." He smiled, and in that smile was the forgiveness and understanding and pride of a father who always believed in my potential, even when I doubted myself. Soon after, an elegant and tender figure approached. My grandmother, dressed in a robe of golden light, she carried with her the comforting aroma of chamomile tea and the sweetness of childhood memories. "My dear Zayden, you have grown and transformed," she commented, with a voice that made moments of warmth and security relive. When I saw her, I felt the warmth of a hug that surpasses any physical barrier. His hands, invisible but intensely felt, caressed my spirit, cleansing the pain accumulated by years of haste and loneliness. As I absorbed this joy of reuniting with loved ones, other faces began to appear around me. Childhood friends, uncles, and even neighbors who had crossed my life appeared as fragments of a past now integrated into this new dimension. Each one had a story, a smile, and a look that said, "We're here to remind you who you really are. Zayden, remember the moments of love and the lessons that taught you to be strong," they murmured in unison, their voices merging into a harmonious melody that echoed in my heart. The energy of reunion filled every inch of that celestial space where judgments and resentments had been left behind. The union of these spirits showed me that love and understanding were immeasurable forces, capable of healing wounds that time could not erase. "It's not your time yet," my father whispered, as everyone's image lit up in collective radiance. These words reverberated through me with a force that dissolved any sense of abandonment or fear. It was a reminder that although I was having a singular experience, My mission was still in the world of the living. As I absorbed every word and every gesture, I felt a renewed certainty that life was more complex and magical than I had ever imagined. The presence of these deceased family members was not a goodbye, but a wave of support and encouragement for me to move forward. I knew that, when I returned, I would carry with me the essence of this reunion, the certainty that the love that lasts beyond life is capable of transforming any existence. While the energy of reunion with my loved ones still pulsed in my heart, I felt a subtle change in the environment. The light around me began to vibrate with a different intensity, as if it was being filtered through a layer of unconditional love. At that very moment, I realized that something greater was approaching, a presence that transcended any concept I had previously conceived of the divine. The atmosphere thickened, and a deep but serene voice echoed within my being. Zayden, are you ready to understand the true meaning of love and compassion? There was no defined figure, but the feeling of welcome and power was undeniable. In the midst of this glow, I realized that the God of my childhood, that severe and punishing image, was disappearing, giving way to a pure and loving essence. With a smooth movement, the light condensed into a diffuse form, revealing a being whose presence filled every particle of that celestial space. His features were not that of a human face, but rather a manifestation of pure energy and compassion. "I am the voice of eternal love," said this presence, each word resonating with the certainty of 1,000 generations. I felt my defenses crumble at this revelation. The rigidity my mind had built up for years melted into silent tears of recognition. At that moment, as if it were the culmination of this revelation, a figure emerged alongside that divine energy, a presence that I immediately recognized, even without the need for words: Jesus Christ. Unlike the imposing, distant images that traditions often paint, Jesus stood before me with captivating simplicity. He was wearing a simple tunic, almost ethereal white, and his eyes radiated a tenderness that seemed to reveal the secrets of the human soul. He approached with slow steps, almost floating on the floor of light, and as he positioned himself in front of me, he smiled with a softness that disarmed any trace of skepticism I might have had. "Zayden, it is not fear or judgment that defines the divine, but love and compassion," Jesus said, his voice carrying an unshakable peace. I watched him, taking in every word as a wave of understanding and calm washed over me. His presence was a promise of redemption, an invitation for me to leave behind the remnants of the past that imprisoned me. "You always carried within you a flame that, even dimmed by the material world, never went out," he continued, with a look that seemed to penetrate my soul. "But I realized that suffering and difficulties are just instruments for our spiritual growth. The message that the world has distorted is not one of condemnation, but of love and forgiveness. The kingdom of heaven, my son, is not out there. It dwells within each one of us." His words resonated like a balm, dissolving the doubts and skepticism that had been silent companions for so long. In that encounter, I realized that the true essence of God was not a distant, punitive figure, but rather the personification of unconditional love, a light that reveals itself in kindness, forgiveness, and empathy. As I absorbed this new vision, Jesus extended his hand in a welcoming gesture and said, "Every step you take from now on will be guided by this light. Do not fear the path that lies before you. Know that you will never be alone." Faced with this revelation, I felt my soul expand, ready to accept the mission that awaited me on earth. I understood that that meeting was not just a goodbye to the old vision of God, but the beginning of a journey of transformation where love and compassion would be my compasses. As I remained immersed in the divine encounter, the feeling of peace began to be invaded by a new wave of perceptions. Suddenly, the celestial dimension gave way to images and scenes that seemed to come directly from the future. The colors vibrated with intensity, and each vision unfolded as if I were watching a movie where time had no rules. Amidst the luminous vastness, I saw the delicate figure of my mother. She was sitting in a rocking chair on a simple porch, her gaze fixed on the horizon. His face, marked by the wrinkles of life and tiredness, expressed a profound loneliness. The scenery around him was somewhat melancholic, The sunset in Los Angeles was transformed into a scene of shadows and silhouettes, emphasizing the absence of a son who, once, was his world. "Mom, I'll be there to take care of you," I thought, while her image seemed to sigh in silence. His loneliness was a painful reminder of the moments I had let slip away, swallowed up in the rush of my corporate days. Soon after, another scene emerged clearly. I saw a boy, my son, growing up without his father's presence. He walked alone through the streets of the city. His gaze reflected the search for something he couldn't find. In a brief exchange of dialogue, I heard his childish voice. "Daddy, when are you coming back?" The question, filled with innocence and pain, resonated with the truth of a future that I, at that moment, did not want to imagine. Every step the boy took was marked by challenges and the lack of support that only a father could offer. These visions were accompanied by a series of flashes that showed the impact of my presence or absence on other lives. In one of them, a busy street transformed into a stage where small gestures of love and compassion fought against the coldness of everyday life. I saw friends and colleagues coming together in underserved communities, where the simple presence of a dedicated person made all the difference. "Your choice, Zayden, will define the course of these stories," a voice echoed between the images, mixing warning and hope. As these scenes played before my eyes, a mixed feeling of urgency and responsibility grew within me. It was as if each vision was a wake-up call for me, upon returning to Earth, to not only reclaim my existence, but also rewrite the destiny of those around me. The feeling that my every choice had a direct impact on uncertain futures was both terrifying and eye-opening. In the midst of these images, I felt the weight of the mission that still belonged to me. There was a clear message in the air. I had the power to transform these futures, to bring light where there was darkness, and to rebuild the bonds that were once broken by neglect. A feeling of responsibility enveloped me. It was not just the search for personal redemption, but the desire to repair the wounds he had left along the way. And it's not just about what you do, Zayden, but about who you choose to be, whispered a voice, as the visions merged into a whirlwind of colors and sensations. Every image, every unspoken word reinforced the importance of his presence and the impact that love and care could have on those who needed it most. In light of all the visions and revelations, I felt that the universe had presented me with a dilemma that would change the course of my existence. There, among the vibrating colors and the soft melody of the energy that permeated that dimension, I was faced with the possibility of choosing, remain in that kingdom of light or return to Earth, where my loves and duties called me. In an instant, the benevolent presence that had guided me there spoke again, this time with a tone that mixed tenderness and firmness. "Zayden, this is the crossroads of your life. Here, everything is peace and perfection, but your heart feels the weight of those still waiting for you below." These words sounded like an echo in my soul. On the one hand, there was the promise of eternity in a world where there was no pain, where love was unconditional and every heartbeat was watered by serenity. On the other, the memory of a lonely mother, a son who waited for a father, and a world full of challenges and, above all, opportunities to transform reality with compassion. I remember looking around, taking in every detail of the celestial surroundings. The beauty was indescribable. Clouds that floated with colors that defy the logic of the senses, a trail of light that stretched infinitely, and whispers of souls that seemed to smile with the promise of a new beginning. Every inch of that space radiated peace, and for a brief moment, the idea of staying there was tempting, like a balm that would cure all the pain I once carried. But then, the image of my mother emerged with overwhelming force. I saw her again on that balcony, with her eyes filled with longing, waiting in silence for the return of the son she had promised never to abandon. And, next to me, my son's face, full of innocence and unanswered questions, cried out for my presence, for a touch that only a father could give. These visions were intertwined with memories of friends, colleagues, and all those lives that depended on my choices. In a kind of internal dialogue, I heard Jesus' voice, soft but full of conviction. The journey on earth is full of challenges, but that is where the true power of love lies. Every pain, every tear, is a brick in the construction of your purpose. You were chosen to transform the world with the light you carry within you. As these words echoed in my being, a storm of feelings settled in, the security of an eternal refuge and the urgency of the bonds that remained on earth. The dilemma was not just between two worlds, but between two versions of myself, the one who had found absolute peace and the one who still had a mission, a promise of love and care to fulfill. I struggled internally with the idea of abandoning momentary perfection to face an uncertain future, where suffering and adversity mixed with hope and the possibility of redemption. Every fiber of my being cried out to come back, to be the pillar of support my family and friends needed, to rewrite the narrative of my life and turn pain into light. Finally, with certainty pulsing in my heart, the decision crystallized. I would choose to return to Earth, not because heavenly peace was insufficient, but because my destiny was inextricably linked to those I loved. I return. I murmured to the vastness that surrounded me, feeling the energy of the universe agree with my vow. The decision made, the choice to return to Earth reverberated like a firm beat in my heart. In an instant, the bridge of light leading me back began to contract, and the sensation of floating gave way to a gentle fall, almost like the embrace of a sheet of clouds. I felt the familiar contour of my body, and the transition between the celestial realm and physical reality unfolded with disconcerting smoothness. When he landed, he was lying in a hospital bed in Los Angeles. The room was silent except for the subtle beeping of the monitors tracking my vitals. When I opened my eyes, I was met with the attentive gaze of Rowan Pierce, the doctor who had always shown rare empathy. She approached with a serene smile and said, "Zayden, you're back with us. It was a true miracle what happened." His voice, filled with concern and relief, was like a balm. Her words not only explained my inexplicable recovery, but also filled that inner void with the hope of a new life. As the days passed, my colleagues and friends, including Gavin Monroe and Sabrina Lowell, gathered at my side, each bringing a different energy, but all united by the same silent admiration for the change I was bringing. The conversations, previously focused on results and deadlines, were now filled with personal stories and a deeper understanding of the fragility of life. "You came back different, Zayden. It seems like you saw the world in a new way," commented Gavin, while Sabrina nodded in agreement, her gaze filled with curiosity and support. The transformation he experienced went beyond physical recovery. The feeling of having undergone a spiritual rebirth was palpable in every gesture, in every decision. Upon leaving the hospital, the Los Angeles night breeze seemed to whisper promises of a fresh start. I walked through the streets with a calmness that I hadn't experienced in a long time, observing every face and every detail with the curiosity of someone rediscovering their own existence. The physical scars the accident left were minimal compared to the invisible marks on the soul, and they served as silent reminders that life is a gift that must be honored. At home, the reunion with my mother and son was emotional. My mother, with teary eyes, wrapped me in a tight and silent hug, saying, "My son, you have returned to us." My son's look, still full of innocence, said more than words could express, the certainty that the family was the home where love always found shelter. I then decided to turn my experience into a silent mission, not to write books or preach from pulpits, but to act. I began to dedicate time to volunteer work in hospitals and community centers, trying, with each gesture, to transmit that inner light that I once felt when crossing to the other side. The previously merciless corporate environment now saw in me a leader who prioritized empathy and collective well-being. Each project now carries a little bit of my journey, I told colleagues, as I restructured the way I conducted business, focusing on social and community support initiatives. This new perspective made me understand that the true transformation was not physical recovery, but the rebirth of the soul. Looking back, I realized that that accident, so unexpected and violent, had been the catalyst for a life filled with love, compassion, and purpose. Each day that dawned was a new opportunity to spread the light that, in a moment of near death, had shown me the way. Waking up on that new day, with the certainty of having returned from an inexplicable journey, was the beginning of a transformation that I could never have predicted. Each dawn brought with it a feeling of renewal, as if the very essence of the universe had been reconfigured within me. The transcendent experience I experienced was not just an isolated episode, but the starting point for a profound change in every aspect of my life. Soon after leaving the hospital, I realized that time had a new meaning. The hours, which were previously governed by deadlines and goals, now flowed with a gentle cadence, inviting me to savor the small moments. I began to notice the details that had always escaped my attention: the birds singing in the morning, the contagious laughter of children playing in parks, the comforting aroma of fresh coffee in the kitchen at home. Every detail turned into a silent lesson that true richness lay in simplicity and connection with the present. My professional routine, once rigid and impersonal, underwent a radical restructuring. In the office environment, I implemented projects that prioritized collective well-being and social responsibility. In a meeting, when presenting a new proposal, I heard someone comment, "Zayden, you've changed. Today, your outlook goes beyond numbers. It reflects a genuine concern for people." These words touched me deeply, as they confirmed that the internal transformation was also manifesting itself in the way I conducted my business. Empathy became as valued as efficiency, and every decision was made with the aim of benefiting not only the company, but the entire surrounding community. At home, the impact was equally felt. My mother, always lonely, now found in reuniting with me the joy she had been missing for a long time. Our conversations were filled with affection that went beyond simple daily interaction. My son, in turn, showed a sparkle in his eyes that only his father's presence could provide. One Sunday afternoon, as we walked through the park together, he looked at me innocently and said, "Daddy, I like it when you're with me. It seems like you always have a way of making everything seem better." These words, so simple and pure, constantly reminded me of the immeasurable value of love and shared time. In addition to family and work, I started dedicating myself to social causes. Volunteer work has become a sacred ritual in my new routine. I often found myself talking to people facing immeasurable challenges, and each encounter was an opportunity to share the light and hope I had been given. As I shared a little of my story, I saw people's eyes light up with the possibility of change, and it filled me with a deep sense of purpose. The transformations after that near-death experience were, therefore, multifaceted. It wasn't just about a physical recovery or a new professional attitude, but a complete revolution of my being. I had learned that true happiness lay not in the accumulation of material achievements, but in the ability to love, forgive, and serve. Every challenge turned into an opportunity for growth, and every act of kindness was a reminder that the divine essence lives within us all.